Hello YouTube, this is Kat from Set Free and Pass, and today I'm going to be going through my Witchcrafter deck profile. So Witchcrafter being not even rogue at this stage, but obviously it's a lot of fun, and I found a deck which I'm going to be using for some more casual games. So let's get into the profile and give it a bit more. So go to the monsters. Summon Bear. Summon Bear is basically the beat stick of the deck, although its stats don't really show that, but basically when another spellcaster, including itself, attacks, you can quick effect with this card, basically reveal your hands. For every spell in your hand, you basically get 1000 attack or 1000 defense. So basically it can boost up the power of your weaker monsters, including itself. It's also got a Dark Rule No More kind of effect, where basically if you discard a spell card, you can negate the effect of all effect monsters that your opponent currently controls until the end of this turn. So all in all, a good versatile card. You've also got one Golem Aruru. So Golem Aruru is basically the hand trap of the deck. So basically, if your opponent activates a card or an effect that targets your spellcast monster, you can then basically quick effect. You can either send your opponent's card back to the hand, or you can add a spell, a Witchcraft spell from your graveyard to your hand and also special summon this. But it's got the added ability that, say for example, if you use this during your opponent's turn, that at the end of the turn, you can bring it back. So you can keep recurring this kind of ability once per turn, which in some cases is really good, but obviously means that you've got a little bit more versatility to start getting some of your spells back and also then mounting cards back to your opponent's hand. Then Hane is basically, it's got the ability that when it's summoned, your opponent can't target other spellcast monsters that you control with card effects, so great protection. But also then it's got the added ability that if you discard a spell, and as I said before, lots in this deck, you can target and destroy one of your opponent's monsters or cards, in fact, so not just the monster, but all cards, as long as it's face up, which is a great little bit of destruction. Because of the fact that your spells basically have recursive ability, that if their effects aren't used, you can bring them back to your hand, you can obviously get a free effect out of this. Then use Free Schemata. I can never pronounce this correctly. Basically, this is usually one of the main starters in the deck, but essentially, like with all the Witchcrafter smaller monsters, you can basically tribute this card and also then send another spell from your hand to special summon another spellcaster, Witchcrafter monster. So that's where you got Madden there or your Hane, so you can get those quite easily. But also while it's in your grave, you can banish this to send a Witchcrafter card from your deck to your graveyard. So again, because of the fact the spells can recur if they've not had the effect used that turn, you can get cards back and get access to them quite quickly, which we'll get into in a minute. Then you've got Witchcrafter Jenny. So this is level 1 of the deck. Run this as free because of the fact that, again, like all the smaller Witchcrafters, you tribute this card and it's got one, you can special summon Witchcrafter from your deck, which is pretty much a standard effect, but also it's got the added ability that when you banish this card, you can have one spell from your graveyard, and banish it, and basically the effect of this becomes that. So essentially you play this, you play your Holiday, for example, which is your Monster Reborn, it gets that effect, and it means you can get that. So if for whatever reason you've used one of them, you can then obviously get it back that way if you can't get it out of your grave. So I mean, it's great recurability of your spells for a level 1, which is quite easy to bring out, but then you can also then send it to bring out a bigger monster. I run 2 Pithori. So 2 Pithori, I find that some people use this as 1, but I use it as 2. But again, tribute this to bring out a spellcaster from your deck. When you banish this card, you can draw a card and send one spellcaster card from your hand to the graveyard. And if you have none, banish your entire hand. So you have got the ability to draw into an additional card if you need to. Then the one of, I run 1 Pithori. So I run this, again, the special summon from your deck. But if you have no cards in your hand, you can banish these cards from your graveyard, then tag one Witchcraft card in your grave and add to your hand. So basically it gives you the ability then to recur monsters or spells again. But because it's a one of, and because you have to have no hand, it's not very rare it comes up, but I run it as 1 just in case that opportunity comes up. It works quite well. Then the added engines, I then run 3 Magician Souls. So Magician Souls in our spellcaster deck works really well because 1, you run a lot of spells, so you can basically send off 2 quite easily to get a draw 2, and because of the fact if they haven't used their effects and you recur them back, you gain a lot of advantage. Also because of the fact that it's got the ability to special summon, you can obviously go into your link plays, and being a spellcaster, it goes quite well with the theme. And with that I use 2 Legion of Chaos, because 1 allows you to search the Magician Souls, but also you can then pitch this from your deck to then be able to special summon it. I run it as 2 and 3 because I find it's the most consistent, but in general, because of the fact how this deck works, potentially, even if you draw the extra Magician's Souls, it's still level 1, and it's something you can discard if need be for some of the other effects. 1-for-1 is also another card I use because of the fact with not only Magician's Souls, but you've also got Jenny, which are level 1s, so you've got plenty of targets for those, so it gets into your plays. Creation is basically the rotor of the deck, so it searches for your Witchcrafter monsters, and also then, as I say, with all the spells, they have the ability that if they haven't used that on-field effect, or you haven't used the effect, the first effect, you can get them back there, but obviously 1 per turn, and only once that turn. Unveiling. So Unveiling I find is really useful because of the fact it allows you to get your bigger monsters out of your hands. So one of the main issues you find with most of these kind of decks is that your hand gets full of cards you can't use, whereas this basically allows you to unclog your hand by basically special summoning a monster from your hands. And then basically your opponent can't activate in response to that. So Holiday, this is the Monster Reborn of the deck. So specifically for Witchcrafters, not much more to say here other than it's an extender. I'm not going to go into the fact it has the effect, but if it's a Witchcrafter and has a card, basically it comes back. Draping, because of the fact it's basically your spell destruction, but for every, basically up to the number of Witchcrafter monsters you control, you can target that many cards basically on field and destroy them. So potentially you might have 1 or 2, so that means you can destroy 1 or 2, and it's a quick display. And again, because it's got the recoil ability, you can get it back quite quickly. Scroll is one card that people have used and don't. I find it quite useful, but essentially has the ability that if you were to use an ability and discard a card, you can send this one while it's on the field, but during the end phase it then goes automatically back face up on the field, so it allows you to do that. But also when one of your spellcaster monsters destroys a monster by battle, you can draw a card, so it just gives you an extra draw power, and because of the fact it keeps coming back, you get quite a lot of use out of it. Buy Street is really good as well because of the fact that the first time each Witchcrafter monster will be destroyed in turn, but it doesn't. So therefore it gives you that extra protection. And basically again, if you need to discard a card, you can get rid of this off the field. So if you've used the effects to protect you, you can then get this off the field to pay for a cost. And then also you can get it back in your own phase, basically it goes face up. So you can recur that during your opponent's turn. So for example, you summon Hane, you can then use this effect, and then potentially then in the next end phase, you could then get this back. I run 1 Metal Foe Fusion because of the fact there's a lot of spells in this deck, and because of the fact the ability to keep discarding spells is quite prevalent. But basically this allows you, is when it gets into the graveyard, you can hand that into your deck and basically draw a card, but it goes back into your deck. I run 3 Spell Chronicle. So Spell Chronicle is really good because of the fact when you activate this, you can send your entire hand to the graveyard, so usually at this point you'll have your hand full of Witchcrafter cards. But then, because of the fact that essentially when this resolves, you can then basically banish 5 additional spells. So it means you can go search for effects to banish those. When you go to Betrayals, which I'll get to in shortly, it allows you to get back, and I'll go into that shortly, but this allows you to banish cards from your deck. So for example, you can send 1 Scroll, 1 Holiday, 1 Creation, 1 Unveiling, and also potentially get them all back. Magician's Restage. So Magician's Restage is basically a search to get a level 3 or lower spellcaster monster, and allows you to special summon it. And also things like Magician's Souls and get them out to get their effects. But the added effect there, basically, when it's then sent to the graveyard, you can have 1 continuous Magician's continuous spell to your hand. Which, because of the fact if you bring out like Magician's Souls, you can get rid of this to draw a card, but then also get search a card. So then you've gone from finding a card to get your Magician's Souls, that's 1. You then get rid of this, so you then draw a card and get the effects of that, so it's plus 2 just basically for playing that and getting that kind of combo, so there's no end to. So potentially I would up this, but probably the cost of maybe a Spell Chronicle, but I find this quite useful. But also it might be a case of potentially you might not want to use as many of them because of the fact that it does require them to be in the graveyard rather than your deck, so it is a bit situational. I use 1 Magician's Left Hand, and I use 1 right hand, which is probably the right way, so left to right. So the left hand basically negates the opponent's first trap or effect. It resolves each turn if you control a spellcaster monster, and then you destroy that card. Whereas the right hand has the ability to negate your first spell or effect that resolves in turn while you control a spellcaster. So basically gives you a little bit of negation on the field, but completely nothing because you run a deck full of spellcasters. So now go to traps. It's got 2 Patronus. Patronus basically has the effect that basically you can target one of your spellcasters that is banished from your graveyard and back to your deck, so you basically recur some of your spellcasters. And then you add 1 spell, witchcraft spell from your deck to your hand, which again gives you that searchability. It also has the added effect that when it's sent to the graveyard, not in the same turn. So for example, with this card, you would then get the spell from your deck by sending it back, which just souls this off. But that means that in the next turn, if you've used this after you've used Spell Chronicle, you can potentially then basically get any number of banished witchcrafter spells with different names and add them to your hand. So because you're choosing 5 different ones to send off with Spell Chronicle, you get all 5 back to your hand. This gives you an ended advantage. You get the 1 for obviously getting the card from your deck, but also then when you're sending it with Magician's Souls, you get the +1 from that, but also you get +5 from getting them from the air. It's so fantastic. And then the other one I use is Impermanence, so Infinite Impermanence, which not really much to say in terms of it's a great negation card, but very versatile and find it very useful in this deck. And also if you don't need to use it, Magician's Souls allows you to get an extra +1 from that as well. So going into the extra deck, so I got 2 Selene. So the reason why I run 2 Selene is because of the fact that you are going to run into this quite a lot, but also because of the amount of spell cards. And because of the fact you're going to get at least 3 counters, if not 6 or more, that you're going to be able to start special summoning spellcasters, which allows you to extend your plays. So this goes into like your access codes and so on like that. So basically, can't see any reason not to use it. Not only is it a spellcaster, but also because of the fact that it benefits from the number of spells you have used. I use 1 Artemis, mainly because it's a Link 1. So if you're in a situation where you need to send a card from your field to the grave for whatever reason, Artemis is really good ability to do that. I have contemplated adding a few different combos in terms of when the new fusion card comes out, and then potentially this will allow you to essentially potentially even use the Magistus engine as that kind of bit. But I find this is quite a good card in terms of getting in and being a light target. Doesn't really come up very much, and probably this could be changed for anything, but I just find it's quite useful. Then obviously access code. Access code is access code. I mean, what else do you need to say in terms of quite easy to bring out with Selene? Because I run a lot of level 1s, I run Relinquish Enema. Most people will work around the zones, but obviously if they don't, you've got this ability and you have a lot of level 1s that you could go into. And because of the fact you'll be able to get rid of your opponent's monster, and because of the fact that you need a little bit of removal, this is very useful. Because I run a lot of level 1s, there's Linkuriboh. So Linkuriboh is obviously great because of the fact it helps you with battle damage. Then for the Charmers, I use the Wind Charmer because there's a lot of wind targets and there's quite a lot of wind decks out there that more likely you're going to see than some of the others. Dark, because why wouldn't you run Dark? If you can run Dark, why not? Also the Light Charmer. So Light Charmer and Dark ones are the main ones that you'll go into, but it just gives you the option if you do have the ability to go into the Wind one if you want to. But being able to special summon your opponent's monsters is fantastic with this deck. 1 IP. IP is great because of the fact that 1, you can go into some of your other plays, but also because of the fact I run the Nightmare package, so it gives you a little bit more protection or disruption during your opponent's turn. So being able to drop this off to obviously bring out one of these two to disrupt your opponent, which this deck does suffer because of the fact it hasn't really got much of a grind game if you get into one of those different ones, whereas this gives you the ability to just play when where there's not usually an opportunity to do so. And because I run a lot of level 1s, I run 1 XE level 1, which is Nightingale. It's quite easy then going to your Dianad and your Zeus. So I find these ones the easiest one to go into because you're not getting destroyed. You can attack directly, which is great, but also just gives you a little more protection if you need to. But because of the fact that it goes into Zeus quite easily and you run a lot of level 1s, so if you bring out your Jenny and then also then a Magician's Souls, you can go into this quite simply. So yeah, that's the deck profile. As I said, what I'm planning to do is maybe have a couple of games on the channel showing this off. But yeah, as always, if you enjoyed the content, please subscribe. Again, we've been growing pretty quickly over the last couple of months, and basically we're looking to continue that. And any comments and any suggestions, please drop them in the comments. So this is Cat from Set Free and Pass, and hope you have a good day. See you later, bye.